Greetings family, peace and love to you and yours. This is Guru and thanks for visiting my channel. This video is about these white Americans who say they're already having frank conversations about racism. Most white Virginians say they've had frank conversations about racial equality or prejudice with African Americans. The question was asked, in the past few years, have you had a frank conversation about issues related to racial equality or prejudice with someone who is African American, or haven't you done this? Question mark. Among white registered voters in Virginia, let's take a look at the percentages. So as I mentioned, this is involving white Virginian registered voters overall, and overall 65% say in the affirmative that yes, they have had those conversations with African Americans. 73% of those with college degrees, 59% without college degrees, 78% are under 40 years of age, and 69% are between the ages of 40 and 64, and then 45% age 65 and older. So I just want to say that after I looked at this, I laughed because I thought of all the conversations I have had with, well, people who I'm assuming they are European or white Americans. And these are the only ones that I could say would be online. These would be the people who I actually would go back and forth with online. That's the only way I could say in the affirmative. So I find this shocking that white people have such a high percentage of saying that they've had these conversations with us black people. I highly doubt that. Maybe they're using the same logic that I'm using, that, well, yes, I have these conversations with people online. Now, with that said, let's talk about that. People online, you hear all the vitriol, all the racist diatribe. They give you all of that. It's not a frank conversation about racial equality or prejudice. It is not a frank conversation at all. It is mainly name calling, the usual calling black people niggers and things of that nature, constantly comparing us to animals and things of that nature, you know. So I don't believe this at all, but I wanted to report to you how they try to put this out in the world, in the universe, that it's like this, and it's not. But I digress. Let me get back to the story. Amid the rise of vocal white supremacy and nationwide protests against police brutality and racism, there have been calls for Americans to have more honest conversations about race. A recent survey of Virginia voters found that most, regardless of race, have had those tough discussions at least once in recent years. Large majorities of white and black registered voters in Virginia said they've had frank conversations about equality or prejudice with people of other races, according to the Washington Post Schar School poll. A 65% majority of white Virginia voters said they had frank conversations about issues related to racial equality or prejudice with an African American person in the past few years. A similar 67% of black Virginia voters said they had such conversations with someone not African American. Among white people, age and education were strong factors in determining who is having those tough conversations and who isn't, much bigger factors than political party. While 73% of white Virginia voters with college degrees say they've had frank conversations about race with African Americans, that falls to 59% of those without degrees. More young white voters report having had frank conversations with African Americans, 78% of those under 40 years of age have had conversations about racial prejudice with black people, compared with 69% of 40 to 64 years old and 45% of those 65 and older. So, family, what does all this equate to? That is the most important question. Well, I don't have all the answers, but I'll just say this. I'll give my point of view. My point of view is, so what? Even if those figures are true and correct, which they're not, but so what? If we have had those frank conversations, what does that all mean? How does that change systematic white supremacy and racism? How does it affect policies across our nation? How does it bring about racial justice in America? Those are the more important questions. So while you give me these numbers based on some poll, based on a certain percentage of people that don't really amount to beans, we really want to know the more important questions. How does that change things? This is Guru. Thanks for watching. Peace out.